Good afternoon, everybody. It is great to be here. I know I see a lot of friendly faces in the crowd, but for those that I don't know, I'm Vanessa Green-Cinders, President and CEO of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. And it is a pleasure to be here with all of you to kick off the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition's 2026 Heartland Summit. It's great to see so many leaders from business, agriculture, national security, government, and communities across Indiana, across the Heartland, gathered for this important conversation. At the Indiana Chamber, we're focused on ensuring Indiana remains one of the best places in America to live, work, start a business, and invest. That vision is reflected in our Indiana Prosperity 2035 plan, our long-term roadmap for strengthening economic growth, developing talent, advancing innovation, and enhancing our competitiveness. And one thing is clear, Indiana's future success is tied to our ability to compete and lead in a global economy. Indiana's manufacturers, life science companies, technology firms, logistics providers, and farmers all depend on access to global markets, reliable supply chains, and a strong American presence around the world. When businesses can reach new customers and new opportunities, Indiana communities prosper. And I think that message is more important now than ever. So just as important, Indiana is also emerging as a key player in our nation's defense and security ecosystem. Investments across our state are strengthening America's defense industrial base while creating high-paying jobs and driving innovation here at home. It's why the Indiana Chamber launched our Defense Council, bringing together leaders from industry, government, education, and military to strengthen Indiana's position in defense, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, and emerging technologies. We see this as both a national security priority and an economic opportunity for Indiana. But these issues are deeply connected. Our economic strength, international partnerships, diplomacy, national defense, all help shape Indiana's ability to compete, grow, and lead in the years ahead. And that's why today's conversation is so important. That's why it's a real honor to be here representing the Indiana Chamber and have the ability to welcome all of you. And we are so fortunate to have such an outstanding group of leaders with us, including one of Indiana's strongest voices on national security, economic competitiveness, and American leadership around the world, Senator Todd Young, who I know is joining us soon. And so with that, I just want to thank the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition for bringing us together. And thank you all for being here. And now it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage the President and CEO, Liz Schreier, to give some more remarks.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, for kicking us off, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to add my welcome to USGLC's annual 2026 Heartland Summit, our sixth one, and I love that we are in Indiana. I love being in Hoosier country. My son went to school here. I, though, am a Wolverine, so we had a lot of tension in the family until both universities won the national championship this year, so that was a good thing. I want to thank our National Indiana Advisory Committee, our partners who really helped make today possible, so thank you to all. I also want to acknowledge those that have been impacted by the recent devastating floods. Our thoughts are certainly with the families and communities, and very grateful to the first responders. So our thoughts and with all of those. Looking forward to Senator Young being here just shortly, and with what I know is going to be a great conversation. You know, as I look around this room, it is a reminder of what makes USGLC so unique. For those of you new to us, in Washington, we are known as the Strange Bedfellow Coalition. Now, you're not strange at all, but it is unique when we get this kind of different folks together in a room, certainly in Washington. Veterans and military leaders, business leaders and farmers, faith and humanitarian leaders, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And what I love about it is that we are all joined in a common belief that when America leads, the heartland wins. And when we get together in these conversations, and I travel around the country, I always ask kind of one simple question. Why it matters that why does American global leadership matter to your family and your community? And I'm amazed at these powerful answers that I get. I hear from veterans who tell me that it means preventing crises so that our troops don't have to be put in harm's way. I hear from farmers that tell me it means more markets to sell their crops. And business leaders who tell me it means more markets for our consumers and more better supply chains for them. Now, in Indiana, same thing was what Vanessa was just saying, you already know that. You are so well connected, you build things, you grow things, you invent things, and you share them with the world. I loved learning or being reminded when I came here and was looking and reading about 750,000 jobs in this state are connected to international trade. And it's not just large businesses, but small and medium-sized businesses. Faith and nonprofit organizations are impacting the world. There's several of our important members, one you're going to hear from today, Cargill, and companies like ADM, who are connecting American grown commodities to food systems, global markets, at the same time connecting to wonderful organizations like the World Food Program. Roche, who has employees, just 4,000 employees in Indianapolis, who's innovating to help fight infectious diseases and working with the U.S. government on programs like PEPFAR that fights HIV/AIDS, that has saved 26 million lives. So these are, and there's many more I could tell, but these are proud Hoosier stories that are win-wins for Indiana and win-wins for the world. And this is at a time that you all know, and we're going to talk about it today, that are very high stakes in the world, very high stakes for us. When there's war and conflict, we feel it here when it affects our gas prices and our grocery prices, when there are infectious diseases that land on our doorsteps, when America steps back and our competitors are very happy to fill it very quickly. So the question isn't if what happens overseas affect us. It's if we as America are ready to step up and with the tools that we use to compete, to lead, and to win. So showing up is certainly about the military, but it's also about using smart diplomacy, effective international assistance, working with our allies. And some of the most active voices, and you're going to hear from one today on our panel, are the military leaders who understand that it's far less costly to prevent crisis than to go to war. So I just want to end with one story that I think illuminates what this all means and what we're going to talk about today. And it's the story of Joe Ricker, a 30-year Army veteran who founded At Ease Orchard right here in Wilkinson, Indiana. Now, after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, Joe turned to farming to create a place where his fellow veterans can find community and learn skills in agriculture. Yesterday, Joe and his wife, Annette, were gracious enough to host some of my colleagues at his farm. And during their visit, Joe shared how the impact of conflict tends to remain long after military service ends. And his story reminds all of us that honoring our veterans means both supporting them when they return, and it also, as Joe is wrote in an upcoming op-ed, using every tool of American leadership, including diplomacy and international assistance, to prevent future crises and build a strong America. So Joe is sitting right over there. I thank you, and we all thank you for you. For your unwavering commitment to neighbors helping neighbors, for joining our growing coalition for both our Farmers for Prosperity program and our Veterans for Smart Power. And you are exactly the spirit of what makes USGLC this unique coalition. So thank you. And I welcome all of you to our conversation today, that timely conversation about how America and the Heartland wins in the world. So to introduce our featured speaker and get started, I'm thrilled to introduce a very special friend of USGLC, Ambassador Kip Tom. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Liz. It's certainly an honor to be with everybody here this afternoon. But before we get started, I want to say thank you to the wait staff, the food service people, and most importantly, the farmers that put the bounty on the table out there for all of us to enjoy. So let's give it up for them. Well, my name's Kip. I'm a farmer. I've lived my life in Leesburg, Indiana, a small town up in northern Indiana. It's where our family put our roots down back in 1837. My ancestors arrived from Switzerland and settled in Pennsylvania in the late 1600s, chasing opportunity and a better life. Like me, they were farmers. They passed down a legacy of hard work, resilience, and a deep connection to the land, to community, and to our nation. I'm proud of that heritage. It's in my blood, and it has defined, helped shape me who I am today, and it continues to shape our future generations and our own agribusiness. As a farmer from Indiana, and as someone who has had the privilege of representing the United States of America on the global stage at the UN food programs and agriculture programs working around the world, I've seen firsthand what happens on farms here in the Heartland that can have an impact far beyond our borders. So we always know we were always trained early on that there was 4 pillars of national strength. The first one being diplomacy, the ability to avert any crisis or take advantage of a situation going on around the world. Number 2 is the best in informational resources. We had to have the ability to have information that would guide us economically, militarily, or in our diplomatic negotiations. The other one was then the ability to have the strongest military, but the fourth one is the strongest economy. But there is a fifth one. There's a fifth one that the other 4 cannot exist without, and that's food. So we've always said there's 5 pillars to food security. So food security is national security, something many developing nations cannot claim. When people can't feed their families, instability grows that fuels conflict, displacement, and migration, and creates challenges that ultimately reach us here at home, as we've seen before. As numerous global leaders have experienced, all societies are only 3 meals from chaos. And right now, there are over 645 million people facing chronic hunger. That's 1 in every 12 people. And given the current geopolitical situation, I'd expect that number to continue to grow. I've recently returned from Dubai and had conversations with a number of fertilizer producers throughout the region, talking about the Straits of Hormuz. I'm going to Venezuela in a few weeks with some discussions there. And I sense this issue on food security globally will go on for a number of years yet. That's why effective international assistance matters. Programs like Food for Peace help meet the urgent needs while purchasing close to $2 billion worth of surplus commodities from American ag farmers every year. So I've spent my life in agriculture producing globally, and I've seen around the world what American farmers, American innovation, and American leadership can accomplish when we put them together. And that's really what today's conversation is about, how we bring together America's strengths, from agriculture and business to diplomacy and defense, to keep our country secure, competitive, and leading in the world. And now it's my pleasure to introduce three leaders on this topic. In his nearly 28 years at Cargill, Mr. Darren Kroc has served as has served as a variety of leadership roles across the organization, from here in the Heartland to Geneva, Switzerland. He currently serves as Cargill's president of North American Agriculture and Trading Group, where he oversees the movement, processing, and trading of crops and agriculture commodities. Next, we have Admiral William Fallon, who is a highly decorated U.S. Navy veteran with over 40 years of military service and is a member of USGLC's National Security Advisory Council. He most recently served as the commander of the U.S. Central Command, the first Navy officer to lead that command, where he oversaw U.S. military operations across the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Horn of Africa during the height of the wars in Iran and Afghanistan. Earlier, he served as the 31st Vice Chief of Naval Operations and led both U.S. Fleet Forces Command and the U.S. Pacific Command. So now it's my honor. Oh, I'm told to keep rolling here a little bit. Means the senator isn't in. So before I introduce Senator Todd Young, and he is one of my greatest champions in my pathway to serve as an ambassador a number of years ago. Going into that mission was something that I can share with you at this time, that a lot of times we take for granted what we have available to us here in the United States. We think about the innovations we have here, the great companies. We have Corteva here in Indiana, we have Bayer, we have other companies that provide us the innovation to make sure we're a food secure nation. And I share this story about innovation often. It's about my father. 4 days before my father passed, Dad said, "I want to go to the farm one more time." And I said, "Okay, let's go." We walked out into the garage. We got in my father's pickup truck, and he drove, of course. And we went down the farm. We saw some calves that were born just that day that he had artificially bred the cows earlier in the year. And then we went on down to a farm field, the first field that he farmed in as a child. And he said, and we sat on a rock, and it was cold, but we sat on this rock, looked out across the field, and Dad said, "You know, I can remember when my father plowed this field with a mule, and I walked behind him in the furrow. And I remember you in the early 1960s walking behind me with your dog in the furrow, following me along the way." He said, "You know, when I was young, this field would yield 30 bushel of corn." He said, "I'd like to know, what did it yield this year?" And I said, "Dad, I think somewhere around 240. So think about that eightfold increase that we've seen in productivity in one generation, or two generations, basically. We got to keep that innovation rate going here in the United States, and we need to make sure that we can take that innovation and put it in other places around the world, especially in the developing nations that are so starving to feed themselves. So with that, are we ready yet, or? Okay, now allow me to introduce today's featured guest and longtime friend of USGLC and a personal friend of mine, Senator Todd Young, who has proudly represented Indiana in the Senate since 2017. During his nearly 16 years in Congress, he has been a leading voice for strengthening U.S. investment and delivering results for Americans. A Marine Corps veteran, a former member of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, didn't want to cut that short there. You're still serving, right? Senator Young has long worked across the aisle to advance his Americans' leadership, from combating tuberculosis to ensuring America's economic security. He brings that same commitment to his work on the Senate Finance, Commerce, Small Business, and Intelligence Committees. USGLC has been proud to work with Senator Young over the years, including recognizing his leadership at our 2021 celebration. And we're grateful to have him with us again today to discuss how U.S. global leadership continues to deliver for Indiana. Please join me in welcoming Senator Todd Young.
Well, thank you, Kip. Thanks for your friendship, for your longtime leadership within the ag community and in the field of international relations as well. I will say, use this opportunity to say that Kip just received some new responsibilities and a new honor to serve our president and make sure that Indiana farmers and other farmers across the country have more responsive public policies informed by good data. And he's going to be the person in charge of that very important effort. So always great to be with this group for thoughtful conversation and a bit of relationship building and development as we think about the importance of staying engaged in the world. For those of you who are new to the great state of Indiana, I want to welcome you, encourage you to spend a lot of money while you're here. But I also want to share something that I suspect you don't know, but I think it's pretty important. So Indiana actually has a certain connection to one of the earliest examples of American power on this day, where we're thinking critically about American power and its origins and its importance and its many shapes and forms. And this early example of American power today that I'll discuss is the USS Constitution. It's a Navy vessel. It fought in the War of 1812. It has some connection to the Boston National Historic Park where it sits today. But the Constitution is still a commissioned Navy ship. If ever you have an opportunity, you're in Boston, have a spare hour or two, you should go over and check it out. But here's the surprising part. She's still afloat over 2 centuries since her construction because of Indiana, because of Hoosiers, because more specifically of a small stand of oak trees in southern Indiana on Crane Naval Base, in a little Hoosier forest by the name of Constitution Grove. Constitution Grove sits within Naval Support Activity Crane, and it is Hoosiers who harvest those timbers, Hoosiers who transport them out to the USS Constitution from time to time so that we might repair it and keep that ship in good order. I take great pride in this, but this isn't about me. Throughout history, we've used these timbers right out of American soil to help keep us free, to fly the flag. White oak played a vital part in tandem with southern live oak in the storied history of the USS Constitution. In fact, when British cannonballs bounced off her walls in the battle against the HMS Guerrier in August of 1812, an American sailor remarked that her sides were made of iron, hence the nickname Old Ironsides. Why am I sharing this interesting bit of history? Well, I'm sharing it because for me, this is an example of one of the many ways in which Indiana finds itself useful in our defense industrial base by keeping the oldest ship we have in our arsenal afloat. But Old Ironsides herself is also a wonderful metaphor for American smart power. She was built and then launched on October 21st, 1797, not to make war, but to defend American merchant shipping and secure international trade routes. In fact, that's arguably the purpose of the U.S. Navy. Hopefully, you don't have to use the U.S. Navy, but its purpose is to secure those lines of communication, as the naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan has emphasized. In other words, this ingeniously constructed vessel, which made up for what it lacked in speed with firepower that the world had not seen, was a form of American deterrence and presence intended to keep the peace, to protect our workers, and to guarantee our access to open markets. All of those things were required by a free people, and it worked. It worked. When the War of 1812 began, it was improbable that American sailors could match up against the mighty Royal Navy. It had never lost to their memory. As the Duke of Wellington is said to have remarked after learning that the Constitution sank the HMS Guerrier, I've been very uneasy about the American naval successes. I think we should have peace with America. What was true in the early 19th century remains so in the early 21st century. Whether it's securing shipping lanes or onshoring microchip fabrication, we cannot have economic or national security without smart and effective global statecraft in the application of both hard and soft power. And few organizations have done so much to advance this strategy as the U.S. Global Leadership Conference. Because of this organization's work, because of its people doing important things. Diplomacy and development are widely understood across this country as essential components of smart American power. And the coalition that supports USGLC, a very broad coalition, domestic and international policy experts, farmers, faith leaders, American workers, former members of Congress, 4-star, 3-star admirals and generals, Fortune 500 CEOs, reflects the broad consensus you've helped build around the relationship between economic and national security power. Every generation needs to be reminded of this, needs to relearn it, and so I'm grateful to USGLC, to your efforts. They couldn't be timelier in the face of a great power competition with China and the seemingly growing capacities almost every week from such malign countries as Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So I'm grateful for your efforts personally. I'm happy to be here today, and I look forward to getting started with our conversation. Thank you. Okay, great.
Hi, thank you. That was fabulous. We're going to get the senator. Can you hear me? Okay, we're going to get the senator mic'd. We're going to get Admiral Fallon up here. I can't wait to hear the conversation about the U.S. Constitution. You, Senator, are right here.
Great, thank you.
And give us a moment to orchestrate.
You're playing hurt. Okay.
I heard the whole story.
Admiral? Yeah, thanks for being here.
All right. Be careful. We don't need another fall.
Got it.
Okay. Senator, I loved, all right, how many people, raise your hand honestly, that you knew that history of Indiana? How do you like that? You have a smart,
well-educated group.
and Admiral Fallon raised his hand. Well-educated. All right, we're going to do some lightning rounds of questions.
People know that.
But I have to follow up on that. First of all, it's so fun being back here in Indiana with you.
Thank you.
I get to see, I want you to know, I get to see the senator in Washington, though I have come here several times with you. And you should know, as his constituents, you are so well respected by your peers on so many issues, but particularly the one we're talking about today, that they just lean in and listen to you when it comes to America's role in the world and what it takes to keep America safe. So that's going to be one of my first questions. So thank you for everything you do.
You're welcome.
Based on what you just said, I have to ask you, are we getting it right? You talked about the need for diplomacy and development, effective international assistance. And then your last comment, Iran and Russia and some of these scary players. Are we using our tools right? Are we getting there?
We're using some of the tools right.
Okay.
And we're, sharpening the appropriate tools. And then there are other areas where I feel like we need to adjust our course a bit. So, among the things we're doing really well is we're taking very seriously, for the first time in my public service life, taking seriously the need to reform quickly our procurement system within DoD. I mean, I can't think of a more important priority than that. There's an old adage that it can be more challenging to get technology into the Pentagon than to smuggle it out, right? So some heroic work is occurring internal to the DoD to solve that problem set and to work on that. I think we're taking supply chain resilience really seriously. I think we're beginning to treat the defense industrial base as an asset and a piece of deterrence by itself. We haven't always done that. I think we would chase value through comparative advantage without giving a lot of thought to the broader national security implications of just letting the markets work. Semiconductors is one of I think, many examples. So those are all things I think we're doing really well. I hope we continue to appreciate the importance of our alliance system, of soft power. I do, from time to time, have concerns about that.
Me too.
I've been very public about my concerns about war powers. I haven't stopped caring about it. Sometimes you don't want to be right about these things. And I felt like towards the tail end of the Venezuela operation, though very popular among the American people, that was laying the predicate for some other action. And you don't always want to be right. But so on those, my job is to identify those areas we're doing well, offer encouragement, and those areas where I feel like there's opportunities to optimize things. I make my views known, mostly behind the scenes, and then sometimes I'll raise my voice, A, to reassure constituents and people I respect, and B, if that's the only way I can affect change, then sometimes you have to shake things up.
Well, we're glad you do, and let's dive into a couple of them. I want to get Darren and Admiral Fallon's views on a couple of these national security points you just raised. Admiral Fallon, first, congratulations on your book. You just wrote a Decisions, Discord, and Diplomacy that's touching your remarkable 40-year career, leading U.S. CENTCOM and overseeing a humanitarian in Iraq and in Afghanistan at that time, and overseeing the humanitarian response during the 2004 tsunami in the Indian Ocean. So given that experience, you argue often, because I've been with you on stage, that we need to not just rely on the military alone, something that the senator has been already started talking about, and we need to invest in the diplomacy, international assistance. So kind of where in your career did you say, aha, this is what we need to be doing, and share that?
Well, thanks very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I must make a little disclaimer. I felt a little uneasy as this program got started with the references to farms. So I grew up in New Jersey, and the farm that I took care of was all of 10 feet by 20 feet, a garden in the backyard. But we had absolutely delicious tomatoes and asparagus and peppers and all, a little bit of corn. But so it's been my experience around the world that this nation has been blessed above, I believe, all nations on the face of this earth in terms of not just potential, but actual capabilities that we have demonstrated quite a few times in a relatively short history of this country. And I've been reminded by the Chinese, among others, that you guys have only been around a couple hundred years. We've been here for 5,000, so don't get carried away with your self-importance here. I said, I got it. But So we have a lot of capabilities, and with those capabilities and blessings, we have responsibilities. And one of the key responsibilities is to use what we've been given most appropriately. And although I spent 40-some years in the military, serving around the world and frankly involved in too many conflicts for our own good, what I took away is that, in my opinion, we should use the military as really an option of last resort. That we ought to lead with the many other attributes and capabilities of national power that this country possesses in great magnitude, again, much greater than just about any other place in the world, and to do good, not just for ourselves, but for other people in the world who don't have those blessings, who don't have, as we've already discussed earlier today, maybe don't have enough food to eat every day, who don't have health care, whose lives are much shorter on average than ours, just because they don't have the blessings that we have. So I believe that the military provides a very, very strong background and capability that we need to keep strong as a deterrent, because there are always going to be malign actors. I find it fascinating today that young people seem to think that it's a totally new world. Everything's different. I beg to differ. Technology may be different, but people are the same old people. They've been doing the same old things for as many generations as has been recorded.
Fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Well,
they argue and stuff. But so as I traveled around the world, I saw a need for many of the things that we enjoy. And I believe that given the blessings we have in this country, it's our responsibility to move out and do as much as we could. And we'll undergird that with a very, very strong military because it's the most useful deterrent we have. But very big world, lots of needs, and we ought to be addressing as many of them as we can reasonably do.
Well, thank you for your service. One of the things, Senator, I often hear you say is talk about economic security as national security. And Darren, I want to get your take on national security, economic security. Throughout your career, Cargill, a company that spans 70 countries. So you get an insight into this probably as much as any business leader worldwide. You've seen firsthand how closely economic security is what we've already been talking about, Ambassador Tom talking about, is food security, is national security. So I'd love your take as bringing into this conversation, not just national security, but the economic security of how you see the role of American businesses, economic engagement, really advancing U.S. national security, and where you think the private sector, businesses like Cargill or like others, and the private sector could really partner with government to make our national security a little more stable. So not quite, maybe we don't have to repeat what's been going on in the world.
Well, thank you, Liz. Maybe I would start by just saying, I think it was mentioned already, but on behalf of Cargill, I want to say to all of those in the state of Indiana that have been going through the difficulties around the flooding and the natural disaster, that our thoughts are with you. We're grateful for the first responders, and I also want to recognize all the farmers in the audience for the essential work that you do. And all the veterans for your service, and to the two veterans here on the stage with me. So I really I was actually telling my wife when I was coming down here, I feel a little intimidated by the two of you here today. So
we're the odd ones out.
Thank you both for your service. We really appreciate that. So I was mentioning to Liz earlier that our mission at Cargill is nourishing the world in a safe and sustainable way. So I can't think of a better fit than being here today and having this very conversation. And so I think about, Liz, your question in a couple of ways. One is, I think the role that American business can play is that of being a trusted advisor to policymakers to government. So if you think, Liz already mentioned it, we do business or have investments and operating businesses in 70 countries. We sell into 125 markets around the world. So we believe that companies like us have a view into some of these emerging risks, be they transportation risks, geopolitical tensions, could be a number of things, but we believe we can play a key role there in advising policymakers. The second thing I would say is when it comes to scaling some of the things, so as government and policymakers set the policy, then how do you scale it? We talked before about, and I know the senators on the National Security Commission on emerging biotechnology. So how do we scale those things? And I think if you took all of the commodities that we move around the world and boiled it down, we could feed 700 million people every day for 1 year. So the scale that we have, and that's just Cargill, right? There are a number of other companies. So I think really this public-private, call it partnership and alignment is going to be even more critical in the future.
So picking up on what all of you are saying, one of the things that kind of consumes Washington, at least I feel, probably outside of Washington, is this conversation about competition. Competition around our rivals, competition where we need to be playing in, and it affects the national security and economic security conversation. You've been playing a big role in this conversation. Critical minerals, about securing critical technologies, about accelerating innovations. And so I'm going to ask you some different questions on this. You've championed, and Senator, bipartisan efforts to strengthen Americans' competitiveness with China. You've done a lot of work in the Indo-Pacific area. Admiral, you know something about this. And I'm interested in tying these questions together. How can we use some of these strategic investments in governance, in infrastructure, in development, in health and economics to have a more competitive edge with our competition? We've been looking at this around critical minerals. The administration has been doing some of this work in supply chains, that these kind of you call them soft power tools, can actually help us have a competitive edge. What's your take on that?
Well, my take is, I think you framed it absolutely correctly, that we need to work with the private sector to make sure where our supply chains are becoming more resilient. But the private sector, after receiving the counsel of those on the front lines of the free enterprise system, like the Cargills of the world, is going to have to construct tools that will incentivize the deployment of capital to solve shared problems that otherwise would not be viable projects for the private sector to work on. We need to build into the cost of certain goods and services and projects a national security or an economic security premium in order to get the capital to move and to bring to bear the expertise of our private enterprise, our great companies. This is what we did through the CHIPS and Science Act. Yep. There was understandably a great apprehension for the government to reshore an entire industry. And it took a while. I actually think the greatest legacy of the CHIPS and Science Act may not be the semiconductors themselves, but we've changed how people think about economic security and economic resilience. As Margaret Thatcher used to like to say, first you win the argument, then you win the vote. We won a really hard argument as it relates to economic security. So now we need to apply a related construct to other areas. We don't want to apply it to every area, but our policymakers working with the private sector will have to show some discernment, which hasn't always demonstrated that as it relates to such issues recently. Do we need more cranes in our ports, or can we rely on China to make all of our cranes to pull our containers out of the water? My discernment tells me that would be a big priority. We should bake an economic and national security premium into that product. Do we need more critical minerals? Which particular minerals and in what quantities? Who might have those minerals? How might we incentivize capital to be deployed and workers to begin working in these various geographies and establish long-term agreements to get those minerals? And outflank the Chinese, who have an extractive neo-colonial model to get the minerals. You just kind of work your way through different vulnerabilities, and we'll never have them defined. It's not something you can do in one sit-down exercise. This is going to be an ongoing way of thinking about our economic security. Shipbuilding is another problem set I'm working on. We not only need to make certain things in America, we need to have some measure of control as to what comes into and what comes out of America and who's shipping it, so we're not dependent on our primary adversary to move our food and fiber to markets and to move things into this country. And so I think that's the proper role of government working with the private sector, and it doesn't lend itself to a formulaic invisible hand, and that's inconvenient for speeches. But the world is more complicated, we discover. General Motors, a plant up in Fort Wayne, idled roughly a dozen times over the course of a year in a global pandemic. And the Wall Street Journal ed page kept reassuring me that supply will meet demand. Well, hell, when? Maybe we need some capacity here. Is that an insane proposition? When your worldview doesn't fit the circumstances on the ground, you should change the worldview. And I think we've begun to really change it. This is no longer a controversial conversation. No, everyone's nodding affirmatively. So I feel like we're very much, you asked earlier, what are we doing well? What are we not doing so well? We're starting to do this well.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So, Darren, pick up on this. One of the issues that I want to drill down, you started talking about farmers, is the ag supply chain issue. How is U.S. government and American businesses like Cargill kind of working to strengthen what the senator just talked about? And what's the economic security risk of us not engaging and going back to where the senator just said we're moving forward? Where are we on getting that part right?
Yeah, I think it's, I can't help but see the board over there that talks about when America leads, the Heartland wins, and I do think that there is this, this need to continue to engage globally, and that's Indiana. All of you here, we heard Susan make the comments earlier in a previous session about the amount. I think it's $6 billion worth of agricultural products are exported from here. This state alone is a powerhouse. You contribute the ag industry contributes $35 billion back into the economy here every year, and I think that is something that's critically important. That markets that are developed, and some of that work, the diplomacy work that's being done globally, are so critical to creating markets, because we all know that you produce more here than what you can consume. Yeah. So those markets are absolutely important to the state here. They're important to us. Like as we think about those supply chains around the world, and I mentioned before where we've made investments, and we just heard the senator talk about certain programs that inspire further investment. I think that's where that partnership has to continue to work. We have to work together if we're going to bring to bear those things, but it's absolutely important that we keep that we stay engaged.
So let me hit a couple, kind of shift gears to a couple hot topics, and I want to talk about global health and where that fits in. I want to talk about try to get Ukraine and food security in before we have to close up. But the reason I'm picking global health is we're seeing an Ebola outbreak in the DRC. That's the deadliest in history. 2,300 deaths, cases 5,000. It's one of the reasons America Global Leadership is at the front line, not only to save lives, but so that it doesn't land on our doorstep. We talked earlier before, Senator, you came. Indiana has become this hub of bioscience research, resources, playing a huge role, and you have taken a big leadership role throughout your career. You have a bill with Senator Shaheen to strengthen U.S. efforts to prevent, diagnose, and treat tuberculosis globally. Is just one of many things that you have done. So talk for a minute about how you have seen our effort as America to lead on global health, why it matters in the world, and why it matters to this whole national security, economic security conversation we're having.
Well, there are certain forces that we talk about as having no borders, and usually it's an abstraction, right? We talk about financial forces, or we talk about the power of ideas. Germs.
Yeah.
Germs are really, they're tangible, though microscopic, and borders are porous. They're invisible to germs, and especially in this, as the Admiral knows, this highly mobile, interconnected world. They spread very rapidly these days. And we do have best-in-class biotech to bring to bear to a lot of these solutions. We have the capability to predict with some measure of specificity what vectors of biological threat might harm people around the world and here in the United States on a given day. And we can prepare for these things. But here again, we need to provide tools to incentivize our biotech industry to, in advance, develop the next generation of antibiotics and other drugs that I'm not smart enough to be able to characterize in the right category, but the pills and the shots to avoid really bad stuff, and we have that right here in central Indiana and across the world. And this is an issue, yes, it's an issue of soft power, because there is, we communicate our values when we help treat people for pennies on the dollar and address their ailments. It's also, as you move down the spectrum towards hard power, it's an issue of stabilizing environments, because we know that food security and disease, prophylactic measures against disease, that prevents a society from sometimes becoming radicalized, and we want to prevent that for on the cheap. But it's more than that, too. It's protecting our own people in a very direct way. And so this is the kind of investment. I know foreign aid and foreign assistance, there are a lot of views right now about foreign assistance, and there's a relook at the whole mission of foreign assistance at the federal level. Let's just be candid about that. I think an easy one ought to be, let's stop diseases over there so that we don't get them here. And there are tools. I mean, I have some solutions. The Pasteur Act that would pay our innovators and entrepreneurs, reimburse them based on sort of a Netflix model to go ahead and develop solutions to the worst diseases, rather than a fire extinguisher model, which is kind of COVID. Hope that some genius in a laboratory solves it quickly so that we can all get out of our houses. That's not the best approach, and so we all ought to be able to agree on that, I would think.
So, Admiral, the Senator just mentioned this is national security. You might know something about it. You oversaw CENTCOM as one of your many, many tours. Why is this a national security risk?
First, if I could back out a little bit and confess that when I was a youngster, I was taught that national security was framed in nation state against nation state, huge conflicts and struggles in the Cold War, communism, capitalism, so forth. As I got a little bit older and a lot grayer, I hope to have gotten a little bit wiser. And what I learned was that for the individual, you and me and our families and throughout the world, this idea of security is a lot closer to home in most cases than some huge army doing, or a navy doing battle in another place in the world. And to illustrate that point, just think a few years ago what COVID did to our lives. and what it did all over the world. I mean, it turned the place upside down, right? So it kind of makes my point about health. So when I was out in the Pacific, back in 2005, 6, 7 timeframe, I made a lot of problems, a lot of issues. There was a pretty all-consuming issue in Central Command when I was in the Pacific at the time. But instabilities leading to insecurity in parts of the world that had nowhere near the capabilities and advantages we had. So I'll zero in on one area, and that's Southeast Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. In that area, I had a problem because the bad actors of the world had focused on this area as ripe for the plucking in terms of exploiting insecurity. And so they were agitating and causing problems. And as I consulted with my folks out there, and particularly several of our ambassadors who were on the scene in these countries, suddenly woke up and said, you know what might do a lot of good here is an initiative towards health. And so I was aware of the fact that the United States Navy had then and still has 2 hospital ships.
Right.
USS Mercy, UNS,
Right.
USNS now, Mercy officially, and Comfort. And so I thought, maybe I can use one of these tools. And so I went to Big Navy and said, I'd like to borrow one of our ships that's currently sitting in San Diego waiting for a crisis in advance of a crisis. How about letting me take that ship and send it to Southeast Asia with a full medical complement to address some of these issues. And they had health issues from A to Z. And so you can imagine what the reaction was. No. Who's going to pay for it? You're going to pay for it, Fallon? And I said, well, we'll work on that, but just get the doggone ship available. So long story short, they finally saw the light, ate it a little bit. You don't have to use the different levers of power here. So when the Navy medical leadership told me that they really couldn't spare the whole medical corps to go out there and help the poor folks in Southeast Asia, I said, well, you know what? I found several civilian organizations that said they'd be only too happy to come man the ship. Oh, really? So all of a sudden, the tune changed a bit, and it turned out we had a mix of both. But the point is, the ship got underway and went to these pretty impoverished areas of the world, and I think they did a lot of good, tremendous amount of good. It wasn't just the doctors and nurses and corpsmen. They anchor off a particular coast and fly people in and out or take them out by small boats. But I said, let's leverage this. So I was able to scrape up some of my people, engineers from all the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and put them to work, get a little bit of fresh water in these places, which was a real priority. So the medical folks did medical things, inoculated people, helped people with their issues. Engineers gave them some water. And I think this was much better than sending in a couple of brigades of soldiers or Marines to show how tough we were with the bad guys. I think it was very, very much appreciated. And so this is an example of how we use other capabilities in conjunction with our tremendous military. I mean, the military folks did the heavy lifting, but it was the specialists, the doctors and medical people who actually got things done.
Thank you, Admiral. Let me maybe move to one more that's maybe a little different than the global health, but that's the food security, and bring it back to the farmers. A friend of mine, David Beasley, was President Trump's appointee to lead the World Food Program in this first term. He actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for that, David. And he said food is the difference between life and death. But it's also the difference between peace and war. It fits right into the conversation that we're having. And I want to ask this one, maybe Senator Young and Darren, to address this. Senator, you've been a leading voice on humanitarian issues and particularly in global hotspots. And you once said food security crises tend to grow terrorists. And you've talked about the farmers in Indiana being a wonderful feeding the world, helping feed the world. And you've talked about it from both a humanitarian point of view, and you've also talked about it from a national security point of view. Why is addressing the food security issue, do you think, important to Indiana, to our national security, from a humanitarian point of view? Where does this fit in?
Well, there's a lot of scholarship around the idea that that unstable situations, food unstable environments are more prone to violence. I think for most of us, it's intuitive, but for many things, you need to go ahead and confirm what is consistent with your common sense with the data, and it all plays out here. So beyond just there being a real need, and that's the national security reason, there's also a humanitarian imperative. It's consistent with our values. We're, of course, not a perfect nation, but one of the things that gives the United States great attractive power. It makes people want to come here, and it makes countries invite us to mediate conflicts. It lends itself to trust, is treating other people around the world, not just with respect, but with compassion. And it's allowed us to attract allies over our modern history, and so there's a hard power dimension to this as well. I'm going to bring this home, though, in light of time, and because I haven't really emphasized it enough, though. There's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity here for Hoosiers to do good and to do well in the process. I mean, this is farm country, but as more than that even, this is biotech country. We have the leading life sciences country in the world, the biopharma company in Eli Lilly. We got the number 1 or number 2 animal health company in Elanco. We've got an ag bioscience powerhouse in Corteva. We got Purdue, and our assets are amazing. And oh, by the way, Crane Naval Base now leads a fairly new portfolio, new in terms of one really being attended to within DoD, and that's the biotech portfolio. Crane's managing that now. The very same science that informs how to solve diseases and improve and extend life is the same science that allows you to come up with drought-resistant crops, the same science that allows our war fighters to be supplied with next-generation materials, super light, super resilient materials. Or our U.S. Marines out in the field to take with them shelf-stable blood. They don't need an extended supply chain. It's right there, just add a little water and boom, there's blood. So, I mean, this is just the leading edge of what, frankly, our primary adversary, the Chinese, are investing in. So the question for us is, are we going to get out in front of this next generation of biotech, whether it's medicines or ag products or biomaterials, or are we going to let someone else in the United States respond to China's growing talent in this area and get all the economic benefits? I think we should lead. There's a certain risk. We could deploy capital, we could train people, and we could discover that there's not as much demand as we anticipated. But you can spend your whole life missing opportunities if you just do what you did last year and the year before and the decade before. So, we could allow Boston or Austin or San Diego to seize the day, or we could just leverage the existing assets we have, and we could lead the way and bring a lot of good to the world in the process. And I choose the latter.
You have a lot of pride in your state.
I do.
How about talk about Ukraine? I mean, you have really been a leader and a voice about why America needs to lead in Ukraine from day one.
Let's start with hard power. It's about deterrence. If we don't enforce the most basic and long-standing of rules of civilized society and countries, which is we defend borders, even when they're somewhat imperfect, then that breaks down, a lot of dominoes fall. And I'm really concerned that Vladimir Putin has designs not just on Ukraine, but I believe what he has said countless times over his life. He thinks that the Eastern European countries are his. He wants to undermine NATO and the Western order such as it is. But I think we need to establish deterrence by continuing to resource the Ukrainians and of course, ask a lot of the Europeans in this process. Things just got more complicated because, once again, we're investing things in the Middle East. But
how about the use of our economic toolkit? And
which I think is great. But if we don't stay the course and find ways to support Ukraine diplomatically, militarily, financially, then that will serve as a signal to Xi Jinping and the PLA and just visit Taiwan and ask them if they see a linkage. You'll hear ad nauseum that staying the fight in Ukraine is very important to their own deterrence. And so these things are linked together. I think sometimes we forget that. There is often this debate, again, in like policy circles about whether we are a rules-based order or if instead, there are spheres of influence. And I think usually it's a mix of both, right? There is a difference in my mind to what happens in the Florida Straits versus another part of the world. So I accept the messy realities of the world, but rules matter. And if the United States is not prepared to help shape rules and defend those rules and encourage others to defend those rules, the whole order will fall apart. And so I worry about that, and it just requires continued vigilance.
So let me close with, Jim Richardson, my colleague, will close out our program. But Darren and Admiral Fallon, thank you so much. But Senator, I'm going to ask you the last question. You started with I
feel like I've said too much already. I've got such talented people next to me, and I just want to acknowledge them.
They are phenomenal, and we are so lucky to have their brilliance on stage. But I'm taken by your opening, giving us a history lesson, so I want you to project forward. USGLC has been honored to be invited to visit with you every few years here in Indiana. And I have followed my own history of Senator Young, who from his earliest part of his career has you've wrapped your vision of America's strength in the world about peace through strength, this idea of Ronald Reagan first and then President Trump, to believe that we need to stay strong in the world through investing in these tools we're talking about, diplomacy, international assistance, alongside defense. And when we come back here in a couple of years with you, how does the world look a little less dangerous if we invest these tools right? What are the steps that you are going to be working on when you go back to Washington around these global health, these food securities, these alliances, these partnerships, so that we can sit here a couple years from now and say, you know what, the world is less dangerous because we got this right?
Well, there are a lot of things we need to do, and most of them, fortunately, in maybe repairing a few relationships here and there, but most of them involve reinforcing our strengths, and so continuing to publicly emphasize the importance of alliances. It's become almost a cliche that the worst thing, the only thing worse than going to war with allies is going to war without allies. So we want to prepare for the day when we have to go to war. We want to make sure that we have allies who are prepared to step up and help us. And it matters how we treat them and the level of respect we give to them and all the rest. So I'll be a force to deliver that message. I think we need to be investing in our research enterprise. It's grown our economy. It gives us access, including our military access, to next generation technologies that are better, and we get those access to those technologies sooner than our competitors. I think that's sometimes a tough argument to make because research can go to projects that are hard to understand and it's hard to predict exactly where quirky projects are going to end up. But on balance, that has really benefited us. I'll be making that argument. I'll continue to make the argument, which is not as hard as it once was, as I covered earlier, but that we need to harden our supply chains and make certain targeted investments to ensure we're not wholly dependent or overly dependent on adversaries or unreliable trading partners during natural disasters like a global pandemic or, God forbid, intentional economically coercive activities or a geopolitical interruption. So that's enough to keep me busy. I'd throw into the mix fiscal issues, something not too many years ago our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff characterized as the top national security issue. That was about $20 trillion in debt ago.
Admiral Mullen is our national chair.
I still talk about this issue. Sometimes with great passion and frustration, and then growing, economic growth. There are a lot of macroeconomic tools to economic growth. That is important because it gives you the wherewithal for all kinds of important things, including military power. But it's also important because the faster you can grow an economy on a year-on-year basis, the more manageable the debt is. And we're going to have to adjust some things if we're doing that. We've got tax policy in a pretty good spot. We've got regulatory policy in a pretty good spot. I think we need more trade agreements, not fewer. That also helps with resiliency. Yes, thank you. Labor market debates are complicated, right? Especially right now. We've secured the border now, though. I think President Trump has a real opportunity, and I'll fight with him if he wants to take this thing up to accomplish something Ronald Reagan could not, which is to fundamentally reform the laws around our legal immigration system and our guest worker programs. If we can do that, and it will by definition have to be a bipartisan effort. He worked on this his first term. He had a very ambitious proposal. I think the Democrats should have accepted it, and they're kicking themselves for not having done so. But if we could do this, that will immeasurably help our year-on-year growth rates and help us with the whole debt management issue. So there's a laundry list of important things.
We're going to invite you to leave a little bit of your bandwidth to help work with us on advancing effective international assistance because you care about it and you're so thoughtful about it. Sit here for one more minute. I'm going to invite my colleague, the National Outreach Director, Jim Richardson, who worked in the first Trump administration, that you may remember, to lead the International Foreign Aid account to close up the program. And thank you. And he's going to do the thank yous.
Thank you, Liz. Let me just say this has been a great conversation. I hope you all have enjoyed it. Thanks so much again for Senator Young, Admiral Fallon, Darren for your insights, and a very special thanks to all of our speakers today and the Indiana Advisory Committee members who've made today's summit possible. Again, Jim Richardson, the National Outreach Director of USGLC. If you like what you saw today, please get in touch with us. We are happy to continue this conversation. It is really important, as you have heard, that America's leadership in the world matters right here in the Heartland, strengthening our national security, supporting our farmers, opening opportunities for trade and businesses. But we don't want this conversation to end. We really want you to share with your colleagues, with your friends, with your neighbors. There's actually a blood drive next door. So if you want to go over and give blood and talk to the nurse about being globally engaged, that'd be fantastic. We do want to continue to be a resource and an advocate for you. So if you did like what you had to hear, please talk to Rose, talk to Eric, talk to Adam on our team. And we'd love to have that conversation about how we are building a stronger America. With that, thank you for being here. I hope you have a blessed afternoon.